How many people were here last year? All right, well, you can hear my story again then. It comes out a little different every time, so hopefully you'll still be find something new. I want to thank all of our speakers thus far and some to come for being here. And, you know, it's been wonderful. Last year I wasn't able to be here for all of it, and it's been very illuminating for me. It always surprises me how much there is to learn about this very multidimensional illness and how many, the myriad ways that it affects all of us as a culture and as a society. And I also want to thank somebody I forgot to thank in the morning, who is Dr. Sechkin's daughter, who did this beautiful poster for us. She spent her time and did it, and we really appreciate her creativity and her generosity. So wherever you are doing something very interesting, thank you. I'm going to start at the beginning and hope I don't go too long because I know we're all a little hungry. And I'll just look over at Sharon, who, you know, since we were in college, always said, hurry up. So I was 13 when I got my period. I got it right on the morning of my 13th birthday. So great birthday present. For starting my adolescence. And immediately and increasingly with every period, every month, I had very severe cramps. I had excessive bleeding. I bled for probably 7 to 8 days every month. I was bedridden for at least 3 of those days and still in very considerable pain for the other 4 of those days. When I say very considerable pain, what I mean is that my boobs hurt and my butt hurt and my back hurt and my legs hurt and my stomach hurt and my head hurt. And most of all, my heart hurt. I knew I would be in this pain because my mother prepared me for it. My mother is the nurse, and for those of you who were here last year, you met her. She spoke last year at the conference. And she told me that when she told me about my body and about all of the things that mothers tell their daughters about the birds and the bees, she said, you know, you'll get your period and that's what means you can start to have a baby, and that's you maturing, and you're going to have a lot of pain with it. Because I had a lot of pain. My mother got her first period when she was 9. And she didn't know what a period was. She eventually got her appendix out. She grew up in India. She didn't come to this country until she was about almost 30, 28. And she always had a very difficult time. So even before I got my period, I was used to seeing my mother miss work. I was used to my mother being bedridden with a heating pad or a hot water bottle with lots of pill bottles near her bedside. I remember, you know, lots of underwear being soiled and hand washed, hanging on the curtain rod in the bath. And I remember uncles and cousins and grandmas and relatives saying, oh yeah, that's Vijaya, poor Vijaya, she has really bad cramps, you know. And then when it happened to me, nobody was surprised. Nobody batted an eyelash, including my mother, including the gynecologist who first saw me. You know, it's funny when you always hear, like you watch Dr. Oz, or you hear, you know, you watch any kind of medical show on TV, or you hear a speech, you know, you start thinking you have symptoms, you know, but because you hear other people talk about their illnesses. In my case, until I met Dr. Sechkin, and to a large degree, even until 10 minutes ago, when I heard you speak, doctor, I had a whole bunch of symptoms that I never heard talked about together. I mean, I had tears in my eyes when I heard you speak. You know, the 2 great loves of my life, I think, had a savior complex. And now I know why. Now I know why I found them. But, you know, more about that later. But I would take 1 Vicodin, and then that would make me nauseous. So it's, you know, so I did all kinds of cocktails, prescribed and not prescribed, to help me. I did teas. I did evening of primrose oil. When I started modeling, I knew all of the names in all of the countries I lived in Italy and France and Spain and America and India and England, of what the local brand names for those kind of painkillers were. I went on the mini pill. I was on birth control for most of my 20s, and I have finally, after very expensive skin treatments and microdermabrasion, finally gotten rid of the pregnancy patches that you get, the sun sensitivity with a lot of birth control. I had a car accident and I have a keloid scar from surgery, so that later when I was diagnosed, or not diagnosed, I had ovarian cysts. So then I went to get those removed at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles. Then later, I kept having these cramps. Nothing happened. I kept saying something is wrong. I went from doctor to doctor. And, I have Screen Actors Guild insurance. It's very, very wonderful insurance. It's very comprehensive. It's one of the best insurances you can have in this country. I lived in Los Angeles, in London, in Paris, New York, and Milan. I had access to the best medical care that money could buy. I have surgeons in my family. I have geriatric specialists, heart surgeons. My mother's a nurse. I was not somebody who did not have access to information, money, or resources. And finally, what just happened was I was having dinner on my second wedding anniversary. And, my period wasn't coming, but my back was really hurting and more than usual. And I kept saying, something's wrong, something's wrong. And my husband thought I just didn't want to go out. Well, I didn't want to go out, really. But, because I was in so much pain. But I didn't want to disappoint him, so we went to Boulay, very fancy restaurant. And, because of what I do, the chef insisted on the tasting menu. And 14 later, I was so in pain. I had to ask the maitre d' for a pillow, and I was so stuffed with food and drink, and I went home, and, I didn't want to make love. I didn't want to go out. I couldn't bend over to put on my heels. I couldn't get the straps of my heels off, so I just kind of went to bed with my heels on. And, my husband was very upset, and I said, I have cramps. Something is wrong. I called my general practitioner, my doctor, and Dr. Primus said, I'll come to see you, but I have another patient. He said, drink some mint tea. Mint is an antispasmodic. I said, we are way beyond mint tea here. This is like you're putting a Band-Aid on, on a hemorrhage. And he said, okay, and I kept calling him. I said, I'm calling the ambulance. I don't know what else to do. I called the ambulance. They came. They wouldn't, they didn't give me any medicine. They couldn't do that. They took me off to Mount Sinai. The first doctor I saw at Mount Sinai, they gave me something to drink so they could do a CT, CAT scan. I threw up all over this $2 million machine. You should have seen the face of the technician. Poor woman. And finally, I had emergency gastric surgery. And after, this is where my scar comes in, after when I came to, everybody was so worried, sick. My poor husband at the time said, okay, I get it, you were really cramping. And, all my relatives were there, woken up from Connecticut, driving like, what the hell happened? And Dr. Harris said, I went in there and, you had some scar tissue. You had some scar tissue that had looped itself around your small intestine. And we don't know why the body produces scar tissue. It just does. And I noticed that you have a scar on your arm, so maybe you just have a tendency toward that. And I see in your chart that you had a couple of cysts removed in Los Angeles a few years ago. Maybe it's scar tissue from that surgery that's looped itself around. And I think it's been there for a while because I just lifted it, I snipped it off, and then usually the intestine will spring back. And it didn't. It remained indented. So I just massaged it, and you should be fine now. Everything will be okay. And I sincerely believe that Dr. Harris gave me the best care that he would have given his daughter, sister, wife, or friend to this day. But that, talk about icebergs, that was the tip of the iceberg. I thought, okay, I'm fine now. I'll go back to the handfuls of Tylenol 3, of whatever, 1 week a month, the pad and the Super Plus, And, as a model, I can't tell you how many jobs I missed. And talk about counting the calendar. I know when my period is, I know when my ovulation is, and I don't even have to look at a calendar because I can feel my ovulation. I know which side each month. It not only hurts in the front, it hurts in the back. It's like a rod, a knife going through your, torso. It radiates. And so, I would remember I would be up for lingerie jobs, and you wanted to do the swimsuit and lingerie because those were the ones that paid the most. And I had a lot of college loans. These ladies will tell you it was expensive wherever we went. So I needed the dough. But, I knew that I would bloat. And by bloating, I just mean like over 1 cup size. By pain, and you guys know what it, we've said it a lot, and we'll say it some more. It was just difficult not only to lose all the income, but to lose the ability to participate in my family's activities, to lose the ability to be truly, emotionally, and physically present for my loved ones, for my school, for my job, for my romantic partners. It was horrible. I remember Kelly used to, she played basketball in college. And I remember she'd get her period and she'd pop 2 Advil and go with her basketball under her arm and an extra Tampax in her pocket. And I would look at her and I would say, why can't I be like her? Why does she get to do that? And I mean, she got to do a lot of things, like reach the top shelf of the, cupboard easier than I did too. But I mean, so it does make you, when something that has to do with such a deep part of your womanhood and your body and your sexuality is abnormal, that pain, emotional and physical, just radiates outward and makes you wonder if the rest of you is normal at all, or will be. Will you be a bummer when you have this boyfriend in the 4th month and the 5th month and the 6th month? You can't go on that weekend to Niagara Falls, or you don't want to go, put your bathing suit on, or you don't want to do those things. Will you be a bummer when, you just don't feel like getting out of bed, and people think you're lazy? Or a drama queen. I am a drama queen, but it has nothing to do with endometriosis. So, and I look at my daughter and I think, shit, I hope she didn't get this part of me. I want her to have everything, but not this. And if she gets it, we'll deal with it with people like you. I was 36 years old before I ever heard the word endometriosis. I had already had 2 surgeries, 1 gastric, 1 for ovarian cysts, and nobody said those words to me, ever. Then what happened? I was on a photo shoot. It was in the middle of my cycle, and I started bleeding. And I sent the assistant out just to get me a Tampax to stuff it. So, I couldn't stop, but we only had the location for the day. It was for my cookbook. And when I got home, I called Primus, and I said, he said, well, are you going to the gynecologist? I said, yes, I went to this gynecologist. And he said, well, who did you go to? I said, I don't know. I went to whoever my insurance takes, and she said it was fine. And, he said, well, I'm very concerned about you because you take a lot of pain medicine. And I know you're not addicted because you always take the same amount, but still, it's not okay. He said, go see this specialist. And I'll never forget the day I went to see Dr. Sechkin. You know, in traditional form for my life, I had, you know, overbooked. I had like 4,000 things that day that started out at 5 a.m. with an appearance on the Today Show to do a cooking demo and ended with a fashion dinner at Bergdorf Goodman. So my assistant made my appointment with Dr. Sechkin at the end of my day for his last appointment and just before this very swanky dinner. So I showed up in Dr. Sechkin's office wearing a cocktail dress. Totally made up, right? Still from my TV makeup in the morning with all these sparkles and stuff. I thought, he's on 5th Avenue and 68th, and Bergdorf is right there, so I'll do my appointment really quickly, and then I'll run, and it'll be great. Because he's very busy too, right? It's hard to get an appointment. He's always doing all these surgeries. So I go in there, and I take off my gown, you know, put on the gown, whatever, and I get in the damn stirrup. It's terrible. And, you know, we all hate it. You should serve wine, Cameron. You should. So I'm there, you know, and he comes in with the nurse, and the nurse is there too. And I know the nurse is there to make me feel better, but that just means 2 people are going to see my vagina rather than 1, right? So, like, okay, fine. Then he does the exam, and I hate going to the gynecologist. The gynecologist and the dentist, it's like both of them ask you to open up, right? So it's terrible, and I always hate it. And, you know, it's still to this day very painful. I mean, you know, you're learning a lot about me, but, you know, to this day, Dr. Sechkin still uses a pediatric speculum on me, and that is still really painful. It is. Anyway, so, you know, he does the exam, and he asks permission to do another kind of exam, a rectal exam, which I've never had. And I say, okay. And then he says, okay, Miss Lakshmi, you know, please get dressed, and I'll see you in my office. And he had asked me a series of questions based on my form, which was new. You know, you fill out all those questions. And he said, can you please get dressed and meet me in my office, and have a seat? And I said, will this take long? Because I'm going, shit, I'm late, you know. I need to touch up my lipstick. And he says, yes, Miss Lakshmi, I think it's going to take long. And I sat down, and he looked at my chart, and he said, Miss Lakshmi, I believe you when you think you've told me the truth to the questions that I asked you about your medical history and your private life before I examined you. But what I can tell from examining you is that I think you've been in pain so long that you don't even know you're in pain anymore, and that you have sublimated your symptoms so that you can go about your day, because I don't know why you're not writhing in pain outside on the sidewalk. And I know you're telling the truth because you walked in on your own 2 feet into my office. But I don't believe you when you say you don't have pain during sex. You know, this, and, you know, he went on and on and on. And for the first time, I felt thoroughly exposed and thoroughly covered at the same time. And, you know, we like to say a lot, you know, I'm from India and stuff, and we always like bash, you know, men from the East and everything, that they don't understand. And, you know, you talked about overcompensating because you have some need as a healthcare professional to save this patient and whatever. And I will tell you that I think one of the reasons that Dr. Sechkin is so good at what he does has nothing to do with his surgical prowess. You know, he handled me in the most thorough, compassionate, patient, and generous way, in almost a fatherly way, you know, although don't worry, we're not that far in age. But, you know, like, he just was so understanding. And for once, someone didn't belittle or minimize my pain. They actually maximized it. They were actually more worried about it than I was. For the first time, somebody who I was sitting across said, "This is an emergency. This is not good. This sucks and we need to fix it. And you're in too much pain, too much of your life." And finally, someone else was saying what I had always felt. The house is burning down. What's wrong with me? And so, you know, a girl may come to you and she may or may not have endometriosis, but if something is wrong, even if she doesn't have endometriosis, just asking the right questions may lead to solving a problem that has gone unaddressed. And if I had been diagnosed at 13 or 14 or 15 or 20 or 25 or 30 or 35, that would have been, 12 weeks a year, every year, that my life would have been completely different. Conflicts I may not have had, other symptoms and the collateral effects of those symptoms that I may not have suffered through. I was so, you talked about rage. I was so angry. After I had the surgery with Dr. Sechin, this was my third surgery, and then after that big surgery, he said to me, he goes, "I don't know, I have to see when I get in there. There's really no way to know." He said, "But I think the surgery will be about an hour and a half. I think you may spend the night at the hospital. You'll probably be, bed bound for the weekend. If we do it on a Friday, you can probably be at your desk at work on Monday. Don't go to the gym for a week." I said, "Okay." I said, "Let's do it the day before Thanksgiving. That way, nobody will know I'm gone. It's a long weekend. My mom can come and help take care of me. She always does, all the time, for any reason at all. But nobody will know. Nobody will notice. Everyone will be on holiday." So I had my first surgery at Lenox Hill the Wednesday before Thanksgiving in 2006. It wasn't an hour and a half surgery. It was a 4.5-hour surgery. I must have had 17 or 18 biopsies, all of which, except for one, came back as endometriosis tissue. My kidneys were in stents. I had stitches on. I had it everywhere. I had it in my kidneys and my liver, in every possible place that you could have it. I had it. And Sechkin, he said, "At one point I got lost in your womb." I said, "From anyone else, this would be a compliment, but from you, it's not." He said, "I didn't know where I was. I had to retrace my steps and think, like, what am I doing here?" He said, "This was connected to that." And I said, "I don't need to know this." He said, "No, you should come into my office when you're better. I'm going to show you the film." I was sure one of these slides you guys were watching was me. And I said, please don't show me that. Please don't show me that." He said, "No." He said, "You know what?" He said, "I'm going to probably, we'll see, we'll watch you, but, let's talk next week." I spent 5 days in the hospital. And I was bedridden from Thanksgiving to February 1st. And when you have all those weeks to lie on your back and stare at a white ceiling, you look at your life a lot. And you look at your life differently. And it just made me angry. It made me mad. Because I thought about all those weekends, when these girls were doing something fun and I wasn't. Or, all that stuff when I could have gotten more jobs. Or, anyway, I've said it a few times now, you get the drift. But I just got mad because it wasn't like I was sitting in some village in India without access to medical care. It wasn't like I wasn't going to the doctor regularly. It wasn't like I didn't have the money or the proximity. I was just unhandled and mishandled. And Dr. Sechin said, "Well, I'd love for you to talk to this patient or that patient, and really, this young girl came to see me and, she loves Top Chef, or can you please just talk to her a little bit and tell her it's going to be all right. And I really think that, what you went through would be helpful to other women." So I started doing that in little doses here and there, and he encouraged me to get involved on a much more public scale, and that's how we became co-founders. And then he said, you really need to come in and watch that video. Because I said, I will do anything not to watch that video. And that's how I became a co-founder. And lo and behold, I had to watch the video. But I'm so pleased that you guys are here. And the reason that I have this microphone in my hand and I scream from the rooftops any chance I get is because I didn't want the next generation of women to go through what I went through. In my mother's generation, we didn't have the technology. We didn't have the research that we have now. We are still a long way from where we need to be. But one of the early things that kind of put a fire in me was that when we first started in 2009, one of the reasons I started is because, I went through a divorce, and I would be, remiss if I didn't tell you that I believe that my condition was one of the major reasons, not the only reason, but a major reason that my marriage failed. I remember I had a couple other surgeries after that one big surgery, Dr. Sechkin, and he said, you're 39. I think we should, freeze your eggs. And I said, yeah, I'm not going to have a baby today, but yeah, let's do that. So he came with me, and we went to some fancy, fertility clinic. And when you go to freeze your eggs, the first thing they do is take a lot of hormone tests. And for this privilege, you get to pay thousands of dollars because health insurance doesn't cover it. Mine didn't. And I'll never forget it. I was standing in the middle of my living room, and this doctor called me, and he said, Ms. Lakshmi, we got the results back. And he said, I don't think you can have children. One of the other things that Dr. Sechkin told me when he went in is that somebody had removed part of my left ovary, and they hadn't told me how much they had removed. They hadn't been very, specific about that. In one of the other surgeries, Dr. Sechkin was forced to remove my right fallopian tube. And so he was worried about my fertility. And so we went to this doctor, and he said, Ms. Lakshmi, we're gonna extract your eggs, and we'll talk about a schedule to do that. He said, but I don't think there's a very good chance that you can have babies. Normally, I said, well, what does that mean? He said, I don't think you have a snowball's chance in hell of getting pregnant naturally. And even with in vitro, I think you have at the most 10 to 15% of getting pregnant. It made me so mad. I always knew I wanted to be a mother. I wanted to do it at a time that was right in my life. And also, P.S., I had spent my whole life trying not to get pregnant. Or my, sexual life, trying not to get pregnant. Now to know that I, probably might not, it was really depressing. And along the way, yes, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, up and down, and where does it come from and what is it for is hard to tell. It's very layered, right? So that's how I started the foundation. And when I first started working with Dr. Sechkin and Jen and some of the other people who work very hard, who aren't here today, I gave an interview to Newsweek.com about my condition. And a woman, a researcher named Dr. Linda Griffith, read that interview at MIT, and at the same time had coincidentally received a MacArthur Genius Grant. And she also had been silently suffering from endometriosis, had had 9 surgeries, the last of which resulted in her hysterectomy, never was able to have children, and right there on the spot decided that she was going to dedicate the next decade of her life to this research. And she managed in her brilliant way to cobble together, her words, not mine, a few more $1 million. And so we were able, in concert with her, to launch the first research center at MIT in conjunction with Harvard Medical School for a research center in gynecopathology. And that continues today. We're also working on other things at the EFA, like centers of excellence. We do a medical conference in the spring. We also want to start a tissue bank here at Lenox Hill so we can research this, because we don't have a lot of research on young women and young girls who have endometriosis because they get diagnosed so late. You, all of you, are our first line of defense. All of you are in a very powerful, unique position to prevent a young girl from becoming me, from turning out angry and, worried about being a mother and having problems in her marriage and not being able to pay off her college loans and all of that. There's a lot of good in my life, and Google search will tell you about it. We don't need to discuss it today. But the endo stuff really affected me negatively. It was always this thing I had to step over. It was always this thing I had to pull my shirt down over. And I don't want my daughter or your niece or or our future granddaughters to go through this. And I don't want our sons not to know how to help the women they love. That's very important to me. I can't stress enough how much this disease affects not only the woman who has it, but those in her family, those at her workplace, and every person she comes into contact with. And the men in our lives suffer from this disease as much as we do. They just don't bleed. It's true. I don't believe that my husband didn't love me to the best of his ability. I don't believe he isn't an intelligent human being. He just was doing the best he could, like all of us are. And I really, really want you guys just to be vigilant. When a girl comes to you, just kind of listen to what she says, but like Dr. Sechkin, listen to what she's not saying. There's a lot of information in those silences as well. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of societal prejudices that she's influenced by, whether she knows it or not, whether we know it or not. And I just really encourage you to help us sensitize everyone to this disease so that we can treat it. Endometriosis is very, very treatable. You can live a normal life as long as you manage it, as long as you understand it. And I think, to your point, doctor, about information being the best antidote to that anxiety is so true, is so obvious, but so true. When you said it, I said, that's right. Because I was just thinking, I said, I haven't really been that upset in the last few years. I haven't, I remember I used to get so nervous and all this stuff. And now, when he said it, I know why. Because there's a reason for it. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Please ask questions. Please tell us how we can do this better. And please help us. Help all the women and the men they love who love them get better.